The ballroom's gilded hum vanished the instant my silk slipper crossed the forbidden threshold. A collective silent gasp followed me from the glittering party into the shadows of the Duke's private library. Every eye was a needle, pinning my reputation to this single scandalous act. They saw a foolish moth drawn to a flame. I saw a door, intentionally left ajar for me to enter. At the center of the room, bathed in the low glow of a reading lamp, stood Duke Lucien Blackthorne. He did not move. He did not speak. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, simply watched me, not with the outrage society expected, but with a sharp, analytical curiosity. The air thickened, charged with the weight of 200 years of silence between our families. I ignored the whispers behind me, the frozen tableau of the aristocracy witnessing my social ruin. My focus was on him. His stillness was not anger, it was a question. I answered by taking another deliberate step inside, the scent of old leather and forgotten secrets enveloping me like a shroud. I heard the faint click of the door as it closed behind me, but I did not turn. They believed he had just trapped me. A terrible public mistake for a duchess to make. But they were wrong. He had not trapped me. He had simply taken the bait. The lock clicked shut with a sound like a final judgment. In the sudden, suffocating silence of the library, Duke Lucien Blackthorne took a step toward me. His shadow stretched long and dark across the ancient carpets, a predator closing in. Society would expect fear, a stammered apology, a desperate plea. I gave him none of it. I simply tilted my head, my gaze sweeping past him to the mahogany shelves, as if I were merely admiring the architecture. "You are either the most foolish woman in London, Lady Vivian," he said, his voice a low, dangerous velvet, "or the most courageous." He stopped just an arm's length away, close enough for me to see the glint of calculation in his dark eyes. He was assessing me, not as a man assesses a woman, but as a general assesses a new and unexpected threat on the battlefield. He did not cast me out. The scandal everyone anticipated never materialized. Instead, something far more insidious began. Our encounters started to feel like a recurring accident, a pattern woven by fate. At a dinner hosted by the Earl of Clarendon, he cornered me near the French doors overlooking the terrace. "I find myself thinking about your visit to my library," he murmured, his presence a wall of heat at my back. Onlookers saw a powerful duke pursuing a woman who had caught his eye. They whispered of a scandalous romance. I saw a man searching for an answer he could not find, his pride pricked by a mystery. I let him search. "Curiosity can be a dangerous thing, Your Grace," I replied, my voice light, letting the double meaning hang in the air between us. A week later, at the Beaumont Masquerade, he found me in the gardens. The moonlight silvered the marble statues, and the music from the ballroom was a distant, muted pulse. He stepped out from behind a hedgerow of white roses, his mask in his hand. "Are you enjoying the anonymity, my lady?" he asked. He was closer now than ever before. He reached out, his gloved fingers brushing a stray curl from my temple. It was an impossibly intimate gesture, a flagrant breach of propriety. I did not flinch. I held his gaze, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of control. His touch was not a surprise. It was an inevitability I had been counting on. His confidence was beginning to fray, replaced by an obsession he mistook for attraction. He needed to understand me, to categorize me, to regain control of the narrative. He believed these moments were his choosing, his pursuit. He believed he was the one setting the terms of our strange, tense dance. He never suspected he was merely moving to a rhythm I had composed long ago. Each encounter was a carefully chosen note in a symphony only I could hear. The illusion of romance shattered the first time I met his aunt. The Dowager Duchess, Ilara Blackthorne, was a woman carved from glacial ice, and her presence at Lady Danbury's annual gala froze the very air around her. As Lucien led me through the throng, a calculated move to legitimize our association in the eyes of the ton. Her gaze found me. It was not a look of social disapproval. It was a look of profound, venomous recognition. When we were introduced, she offered a hand clad in white kidskin, her smile a brittle thing. "Duchess Ashcroft," she said, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "Of Silverwood. We are, of course, familiar with your family's resilience." The word was meant as an insult, a reminder of our diminished stature. But beneath the silk of her words, I felt the steel of something else. It was not disdain. It was fear. A deep, ancient fear that had been passed down through generations. Lucien stiffened beside me, a barely perceptible tension in his arm as he held mine. He was watching his aunt, and for the first time I saw him not as an opponent, but as a warden. Later, while we stood on the balcony overlooking the Thames, I decided to press the crack I had discovered. "Your aunt is a formidable woman," I began, my voice neutral. "She seems fiercely protective of the Blackthorn legacy." The change in him was immediate. The intrigued, almost predatory warmth he had shown me in the gardens vanished, replaced by a cold, guarded stillness. "History can be a heavy mantle to bear," he said, his words clipped. He turned from the glittering river to face me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Some stones are best left unturned, Your Grace." It was a clear warning. A powerful duke, a man at the apex of society, should have boasted of his lineage. Instead, he spoke of it like a wound, a secret to be buried. He was not protecting a legacy. He was defending a fortress with a hollow center. That night, I did not sleep. I went to my own library, to the section my father had always kept locked. He had told me the books were too delicate, the history too painful. I finally understood he was not protecting me from the past, but preparing me for it. I found what I was looking for in a dusty folio tied with faded blue ribbon, the original architectural plans for the Blackthorn estate. My fingers trembled as I unrolled the brittle parchment. The designs were intricate, beautiful, and familiar from my brief, scandalous visit. At the bottom right corner, in elegant faded ink, was the architect's signature. The name was not Blackthorn. The architect who had designed the very library he guarded was my great-great-great-grandfather, Lord Alastair Ashcroft. The whispers followed me like a sickness. What had begun as hushed speculation about romance had curdled into something sharper, more judgmental. The architect of this shift was, of course, the Dowager Duchess Alara. She chose her moment perfectly, at a private viewing at the Royal Academy, surrounded by the most influential matrons of the peerage. I was admiring a Turner landscape when her voice cut through the polite murmurings. "One develops such a taste for the classics, doesn't one, Duchess Ashcroft?" she said, her smile not reaching her cold, assessing eyes. "Especially for antiquities. Some, I hear, have developed a particular fascination with the Blackthorn collection." The circle of women around her went still. It was a declaration of war, delivered with a smile. She was painting me as a predator, an ambitious parvenu trying to sink her claws into their ancient house. The accusation hung in the air. I was not a woman of curiosity, but a woman of calculation. For once, the gossip was dangerously close to the truth, just aimed at the wrong target. Before I could offer a placid, dismissive reply, Lucien was there. He materialized at my side, his presence a sudden, solid wall of authority. "Aunt," he said, his tone smooth but lined with steel. "I was just explaining to the Duchess how the lighting in our library fails to do our collection justice." He took my arm, a gesture of public possession that silenced the women but amplified the scandal tenfold. He steered me away, towards a quiet alcove dominated by a marble bust of some forgotten Roman. His grip was firm, his anger a low hum beneath the surface. "What game are you playing, Vivian?" he demanded, his voice low. The pretense of courtship was gone. This was an interrogation. I met his stormy gaze without flinching. This was the moment I had prepared for. "I am not playing a game, Your Grace. I am simply seeking to understand history." I let my eyes drift to the statue. "Architecture, for instance. It tells a story, doesn't it? The grand designs, the hidden passages, the signature of the man who dreamt it into being." I paused, then looked directly at him. I was reviewing some old family papers the other night. Imagine my surprise when I found the original plans for your library, signed in a very bold hand by my ancestor, Alistair Ashcroft. The blood drained from his face. For a heartbeat, the confident Duke vanished, replaced by a man looking at a ghost. He recovered quickly, his expression hardening into a mask of dismissive arrogance. "A historical footnote," he clipped. "My family commissioned countless artisans. Your ancestor was merely one of them." He was lying. It was not in his words, but in the flicker of panic in his eyes, the slight tightening of his jaw. He knew, or rather, he knew of it. He was guarding a secret he didn't fully understand. I had to press him. "A footnote?" I replied, my voice soft but relentless. "For the man who designed the heart of your home?" Strange. He took a step closer, his height and fury meant to intimidate me. "Let me be perfectly clear. That wing of the house holds no interest for you," he snarled. "My great-grandfather, the first Duke, found the original eastern annex of that library to be structurally unsound. For the safety of the collection, he had it permanently sealed. The entrance was bricked over 2 centuries ago." He finished with an air of finality, believing he had just shut down my inquiry with the full weight of his ducal authority. I held my breath, my mind racing. He thought he had presented me with an impenetrable wall, a story of pragmatic preservation. But he had just given me a map. The confession wasn't just lost in the library, it was entombed. And he had just told me exactly where to dig. He had given me a map, but a map is useless without a key. I needed to get back into that library, and I needed Lucian to be the one to unlock the door for me. For that, I required a stage, an audience, and a request so reasonable it would be an act of social suicide to refuse. I found all 3 at the annual Blackthorn Ball, the glittering centerpiece of the London season, held within the very walls that concealed my family's stolen history. I waited until the champagne had flowed freely, and the Duke was at his most magnanimous, holding court near the grand staircase. The Dowager Duchess Ilara stood beside him, a black-clad spider at the center of her web. Dressed in silver silk that caught the light of 1,000 candles, I made my approach. Every eye in the ballroom followed me. The whispers were now a constant hum, the air thick with anticipation. They sensed a story reaching its crescendo. "Your Grace," I began, my voice clear and carrying, addressed to Lucienne, but intended for everyone. "A magnificent evening. Your home is truly a testament to the artistry of its time." I allowed a thoughtful pause. "It has inspired me to undertake a small project of my own, a monograph on the great lost architectural features of our city's noble houses. Specifically, the works of my ancestor, Alistair Ashcroft." Lucien's polite smile became a rigid mask. Beside him, I saw the Dowager's fan snap shut with a sharp crack. "I am told," I continued, my gaze locked on the Duke's, "that this very estate once contained a magnificent Eastern Library annex, designed by him, a wing that was, tragically, sealed for structural reasons, a lost masterpiece." I turned my most charming academic smile upon him. "I would be eternally grateful if you would permit me a brief, scholarly viewing of the sealed entrance, simply to document the masonry for my research. It would be an invaluable contribution to history." Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. The orchestra seemed to hold its breath. I had laid the perfect trap. In front of the entire peerage, I had asked not for a private favor, but for access to a piece of public history. To refuse would be an admission of guilt, a confirmation that he had something to hide. To agree was to let me stand on the very precipice of the truth. Ilara's eyes were burning holes into my soul, her face a canvas of pure, distilled fury. She knew precisely what I was doing. Lucien saw her expression, and in that moment, he understood. This was not about architecture. It was about a key, a door, and a secret he was sworn to protect. The muscles in his jaw worked, his mind racing through every possible move, finding none. He was cornered. He was He inclined his head, a gesture of regal defeat. "Of course, Duchess," he said, his voice dangerously smooth. "History must be served." He then raised his voice for all to hear. "But such important work requires focus. Perhaps after my guests have departed would be a more appropriate time." The crowd exhaled, the whispers erupting. It was done. He had taken my public challenge and turned it into a private confrontation. He thought he was regaining control, isolating me to issue his final warning. But as he offered me his arm to lead me from the floor, I saw the truth in his stormy eyes. This was not a warning. This was a summons. We were no longer dancing. We were walking to the gallows. The great clock in the hall struck 2. The last of the carriages were being called, but a core of society's most powerful figures lingered, drawn by the scent of blood in the water. They watched as Lucian, his face a mask of cold fury, prepared to lead me away to a private execution. The Dowager Duchess Ilara stood by his side, a triumphant glimmer in her eyes. She believed I had overplayed my hand, that behind a locked door my ambition would be crushed. Lucian offered his arm. "The hour grows late, Duchess. Shall we conclude your research?" This was the moment, not in the shadows, but here, under the unforgiving glare of the crystal chandeliers. I did not take his arm. Instead, I gave him a serene smile, turning slightly to include the Earl of Clarendon and the other silent observers. "There is no need to wait, Your Grace," I announced, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet of the vast marble hall. "My final question is a simple one." I looked directly at him, my expression one of pure academic interest. "You mentioned the Eastern Annex was sealed due to structural instability. Was that before or after the first Duke Blackthorne discovered the fireproof document safe my ancestor built behind the mantelpiece?" A collective intake of breath. The Dowager Duchess stumbled back a single step, her hand flying to her throat as if to stop a cry from escaping. Lucian froze. The color drained from his face, leaving only the stark, aristocratic bones and the stormy darkness of his eyes. The lie he had been raised on, the story of structural unsoundness, crumbled to dust in a single sentence. I pressed my advantage, my voice calm, precise, and utterly relentless. Lord Alistair Ashcroft was known for his ingenuity. He designed that safe to protect his most valuable correspondence from fire and theft. According to his personal letters, the last document he placed inside it, just before his unfortunate political ruin, was his private journal. Every person in that hall understood. The whispers, the romance, the scandal, it all resolved into a single, terrible clarity. This was not a courtship. It was an excavation. I stepped closer to the Duke, my voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more damning than a shout. "My family built that library, Your Grace. We simply never had the chance to enjoy it." The power in the room shifted, a tangible thing passing from his house to mine. The great Duke Lucian Blackthorne, master of his world, was now a man standing on a foundation of lies, exposed before his peers. The Dowager looked utterly broken, her reputation incinerated. Lucien didn't look at her. He couldn't look away from me. He was no longer the captor, and I was no longer the trespasser. He was the keeper of a crime, and I was its heir. He was trapped, not by walls or locks, but by a truth he could no longer deny. The scandal of the Blackthorne Ball did not erupt into a firestorm as many had predicted. Instead, it settled into a thick, watchful silence. The gossip did not cease, but its nature changed. They no longer spoke of my audacity or Lucien's supposed infatuation. They spoke of history, of justice, of a debt 2 centuries old. They looked at me not as an ambitious parvenu, but as the architect of a quiet, bloodless coup. The name Ashcroft was no longer a footnote. It was a reckoning. I did not have to force the issue further. The Dowager Duchess Ilara retreated to the country, her reign of ice and whispers shattered. Lucien did not fight me. He did not deny my claim. A week after the ball, a single unadorned note arrived at my residence. An invitation. When I arrived, he was waiting for me in the library. The door was wide open, The air was thick with the dust of ages, and I saw that workmen had been there. The ornate paneling that had hidden the sealed eastern annex was gone, exposing the cold, bricked-up entrance my ancestor had designed. Lucien stood before it, not as a duke in his fortress, but as a man before a tomb. He looked exhausted, stripped of the arrogance he once wore like armor. He did not offer apologies or excuses. He simply looked at me, his stormy eyes filled with a new, raw clarity. He had been the guardian of a legacy he never truly knew, and I, the inheritor of a truth I had to unearth. Our encounters had not ended, but their purpose had been inverted. He no longer sought to understand me. He sought my permission to understand himself.